It's about an hour after lunch. You're settled on the couch, the room is warm, and your eyelids start to sink. You tell yourself the same thing you always do. That's just what happens when you get older. And maybe it is. But maybe your body is trying to tell you something, quietly, and you've learned to talk over it. That heavy, sleepy feeling after a meal can be one of the first signs of insulin resistance. Insulin is the hormone that moves sugar out of your blood and into your cells for energy. When your cells stop listening to it as well as they used to, that's insulin resistance, and it can build for years before it ever shows up on a routine blood test. So here's what I want to do for you today. Together, we'll go through the 7 quiet signs of insulin resistance that most people over 60 miss, the ones we tend to blame on age. You'll learn which ones are worth a closer look, which ones you can relax about, and one small change you can make at dinner tonight that helps steady your blood sugar. No fear and no miracle cures, just what the research actually says and what to do with it. Let's start with what's really going on, because it changes how you read every sign that follows. Before we get to the signs, here's one plain language picture that makes all 7 easier to understand. Think of insulin as a key that unlocks your cells so sugar can get in. With insulin resistance, the locks get stiff, so your body does what any of us would do with a stubborn lock. It makes more keys. For years, your pancreas quietly works overtime, pumping out extra insulin to force those stiff cells open. That's the silent overtime. And from the outside, everything looks fine. So your blood sugar can stay in the normal range the whole time the pancreas is quietly covering for you. Why does this happen more after 60? A few reasons, and none of them are your fault. As we age, we naturally lose muscle, and muscle is the single biggest place your body burns sugar, so less muscle means less room to store it. We tend to carry a little more fat around the middle, and the pancreas itself gets a bit less efficient at its job. Research on aging and blood sugar shows that these changes stack up, one on top of another. The numbers tell you how common this is. The CDC reports that more than 2 in 5 American adults, roughly 115 million people, are living with prediabetes right now, and about 8 in 10 of them have no idea. Among adults over 65, it's more than half. Sit with that for a second. Half of the people your age, in your grocery store, at your church, are somewhere on this path and don't know it. Not because they're careless, because the early signs are so quiet, and because we've all been taught to wave them off as ordinary aging. Before we start counting, keep one thing steady in your mind. One sign on its own is not a diagnosis. Plenty of people have a skin tag or a sleepy afternoon and perfectly healthy blood sugar. So don't panic as we go. Think of these as gentle nudges to look closer, not verdicts. We'll go from the signs you feel, to the signs you can see, to the one that's quietly written down on paper. That last one is the sign most people miss completely, so I'm saving it for the end. Number 1, the after-meal crash. Picture that couch scene again. You finish a plate of pasta or a couple of slices of toast with jam, and within an hour, you could lie down and sleep. Your arms feel heavy. Your focus is gone. Most people call this a food coma and move on. But when it happens after almost every carb-heavy meal, it's worth a second look. Here's the mechanism. In plain terms, a meal high in refined carbs, think white bread, sugary drinks, pastries, sends your blood sugar up fast. Your pancreas answers with a big surge of insulin to bring it back down. Sometimes that surge overshoots, and your blood sugar drops lower than where it started. Doctors call this reactive hypoglycemia, a fancy name for a simple thing. Your sugar reacts to the meal by spiking and then crashing. The Mayo Clinic describes it causing tiredness, shakiness, and sleepiness, usually within about 4 hours of eating. That dip is the crash you feel on the couch. Why do we miss it? Because it feels normal. Everyone gets sleepy after a big meal now and then. The clue isn't the occasional nap, it's the pattern, especially after white bread, white rice, or sweets. and especially if a plate of eggs and vegetables doesn't do the same thing to you. Several studies suggest that these post-meal swings are one of the earliest experiences of insulin resistance, long before a fasting test would flag it. You don't need to do anything drastic here. Just start noticing. For the next week, pay attention to which meals leave you wiped out and which ones leave you steady. A plate of eggs, beans, or a piece of fish with vegetables tends to sit gently. A stack of toast, a bowl of sweet cereal, or a big plate of white rice on its own is more likely to send you to the couch. None of those foods are banned. This is just your body showing you its own pattern, for free, 3 times a day. That single observation tells you more about your blood sugar than one number at the doctor's office ever will. And it sets up the next sign, because the same swing that flattens you on the couch also shows up on your waistband. Number 2. The waistband that got tighter, while everything else stayed the same. Maybe the scale has barely moved in 2 years, but your favorite pants button a little harder now, right at the middle, while your arms and legs look about the same, or even a bit thinner. That specific pattern, gaining around the belly while the limbs stay slim, is one of the most telling early signs of insulin resistance. The reason comes back to the silent overtime. All that extra insulin is a storage signal. It tells your body to pack energy away as fat, and the fat it favors most is the deep belly fat around your organs. That deep fat isn't just sitting there either. It's active tissue that pumps out substances that make your cells even more resistant to insulin, which tells the pancreas to make more insulin, which stores more fat. Round and round it goes. There's a simple number you can check at home. Take a tape measure and put it around your waist at the level of your belly button. Research used in the standard definition of metabolic risk puts the warning line at about 40 inches for men and 35 inches for women. Cross that line, and waist size becomes one of the strongest single predictors of insulin resistance we have, stronger than anything the bathroom scale can tell you. If your weight has held steady, but your middle has been creeping up, that shift isn't vanity or age. It's real information about what's happening inside. Keep that tape measure handy, because the next sign is the daily habit that quietly keeps feeding that belly in the first place. Number 3. Hungry again, an hour after a full meal. Remember that crash from sign 1. This is its twin. You eat a real meal, you're satisfied for maybe an hour, and then you're rummaging in the kitchen again, often for something sweet or starchy. It feels like a lack of willpower, but it usually isn't. It's the same blood sugar roller coaster, the spike from a refined carb meal, the big insulin surge, and then the dip that lands you lower than before. In reactive hypoglycemia, that dip can take your blood sugar below about 70 milligrams per deciliter, which is the level where your body starts to sound the alarm. Your brain reads that dip as an emergency and does the most logical thing it can. It makes you hungry, and it steers you straight toward fast sugar to climb back up. The Mayo Clinic ties this exact craving and crash cycle to that post-meal drop. So the cookie craving at 3 p.m. isn't weakness, it's chemistry. Here's why this one hides so well. We've all been taught that wanting seconds means the food was good, or that snacking is just a bad habit. But there's a tell. Real physical hunger builds slowly over hours. A blood sugar dip hits fast and specific. A sudden need for something sweet, sometimes with a little shakiness or irritability. That's the fingerprint of the swing. Try this, gently. Tomorrow, swap one sweet or starchy breakfast for one built on protein and fiber. 2 eggs and a piece of fruit. A bowl of plain oats with nuts and berries, some beans, or last night's leftovers. Then just notice. Does it hold you past mid-morning without the hunt for a snack? If protein and fiber keep you full for hours, while the muffin leaves you rummaging by 10, that's your answer. No lab test required. Hold on to that, because we're about to move from the signs you feel to the signs you can actually see in the mirror. Number 4. A new crop of skin tags. Here's a strange one. You're washing your neck, or drying off after a shower, and your fingers catch on a small, soft flap of skin that wasn't there last year. Then you notice a couple more, tucked into your underarms or along your collar. Most people assume skin tags are just a random part of getting older, like gray hair, and often they are. But a sudden cluster of them can be your skin quietly reporting on your insulin. This is where the silent overtime shows up on the surface. When insulin runs high for a long time, it raises a related growth signal in the body, called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor. That signal tells skin cells to multiply faster than usual, and one result is these little tags. The connection is documented in the medical literature on skin and blood sugar, where multiple skin tags travel alongside insulin resistance, often enough that dermatologists treat them as a clue worth checking. Now, before you go counting, because I promised you no fear, a single skin tag means very little. Lots of people with perfect blood sugar have one or two, and friction from clothing or jewelry plays a role too. That's why they cluster in the warm, rubbing places: the neck, the underarms, under the bra line, the eyelids. Early research suggests they can appear before blood sugar ever climbs, which is exactly what makes them interesting, as an early nudge, but we don't yet know enough to call any one tag proof of anything. One more thing worth knowing: having a tag removed treats the bump, not the cause. If the insulin behind it stays high, more can appear. So the tag isn't the problem to chase, it's the messenger. A new group of them, especially alongside some of the other signs on this list, is your cue to look closer, not to run to a dermatologist for snipping. And if skin tags are the raised little flags, the next sign is the skin quietly changing color, in a place you might not think to look. Number 5. Dark, velvety patches in the skin folds. Lift your chin and look at the back and sides of your neck in a mirror. Check the creases of your armpits, maybe your knuckles. If you see skin that looks darker than the rest, a little thickened, almost velvety, like a smudge that won't wash off, that has a name. It's called acanthosis nigricans, and it's one of the more reliable skin signs of high insulin. The cause is the same growth signal we just talked about. Extra insulin drives skin cells in those warm, folded areas to grow faster and hold more pigment, so the skin darkens and thickens. According to the medical reference literature, acanthosis nigricans is a recognized marker of insulin resistance, and the patches often show up before any diagnosis of diabetes. This one gets missed for a simple reason. People think it's dirt. They scrub harder in the shower, a little embarrassed, and of course it doesn't come off, because it isn't on the surface. Others assume it's just a tan or a bruise, and never mention it. It's easy to miss on your own neck too, which is exactly the spot it likes. So here's your gentle check. Next time you're at the mirror, actually look at the back of your neck and your armpit folds in good light. If you find a velvety dark patch that a washcloth won't budge, don't scrub it and don't worry over it. Just make a mental note to mention it to your doctor, because paired with the other signs, it's a meaningful one. And unlike most signs on this list, this one can move in the other direction. Because these patches are driven by insulin, they often fade as insulin settles down. When people bring their blood sugar under better control, the skin frequently lightens over the following months. It's one of the few signs on this list you can sometimes watch reverse in the mirror. Now let's move from what you can see to what you can feel between your ears. Number 6. The afternoon fog. You know the moment. Mid-afternoon, you walk into the kitchen and forget why. A word sits right on the tip of your tongue and won't come. You lose the thread of your own sentence. And the story we tell ourselves is the quiet, scary one. I'm just getting old. This is my memory going. For a lot of people, that fear is doing more damage than the fog itself. But there may be a simpler reason. Your brain runs almost entirely on steady blood sugar, and it's very sensitive to the swings we've been talking about. When insulin resistance sends your glucose up and down like a seesaw, your brain's fuel supply gets choppy, and thinking feels like wading through mud. Early research links insulin resistance in the body to lower glucose use in the brain and to weaker short-term memory in otherwise healthy adults. This science is still young, though, and we don't yet know exactly how much of anyone's brain fog comes from blood sugar, but the connection is real enough to pay attention to. This one hides behind our deepest worry, which is why it's so easy to catastrophize instead of investigate. Before you decide your memory is failing, notice the timing. Does the fog roll in after a carb-heavy lunch? Does it lift when you eat differently? Fog that tracks your meals is a very different story from fog that doesn't, and it's a far more fixable one. So watch the pattern for a few days, the same way we've watched the others. Try a lunch that won't spike you. Some protein, some vegetables, a little healthy fat, and go easy on the white bread and the sweet drink. Then see how your afternoon feels. If the fog lifts on the steadier days, you've learned something a memory clinic can't tell you in one visit. Steady fuel tends to mean a steadier mind, and if the fog doesn't track your meals at all, that's worth knowing too, and worth a calm conversation with your doctor, rather than a private, sleepless worry. Which brings us to the last sign, the one almost nobody catches, because it isn't something you feel or see. It's something already written down, sitting in a folder in your kitchen drawer. Number 7. The number hiding on your last blood test. This is the one most people over 60 miss, and it's the reason I saved it for last. The clue isn't your blood sugar reading at all. It's 2 lines on the cholesterol panel you've probably had done a dozen times, glanced at, and filed away. Your triglycerides and your HDL. Let me translate them, because no one ever does. Triglycerides are simply the fat floating in your blood. HDL is your so-called good cholesterol, the kind that helps clean up the rest. When insulin runs high for years, it pushes triglycerides up and drags HDL down. So a rising triglyceride number, next to a falling HDL number, is a quiet fingerprint of insulin resistance, often showing up while your actual blood sugar still reads normal. Here are the lines to look for, and they're part of the official definition of metabolic syndrome. Triglycerides at or above 150 milligrams per deciliter start to count against you. HDL below 40 for a man or below 50 for a woman counts too. Researchers have gone a step further and found that the ratio between those two, your triglycerides simply divided by your HDL, works as one of the best everyday stand-ins for insulin resistance. In one study of older adults who weren't even overweight, that single ratio outperformed the other common markers. High triglycerides and low HDL are 2 of the 5 official pieces of metabolic syndrome, sitting right alongside that expanding waistline from sign 2. You may already have 3 of the 5 and never have been told. Why does everyone miss it? Because the doctor circles the total cholesterol, maybe mentions the LDL, and no one walks you through the other 2 lines. They look like background noise. They aren't. They may be the earliest paper trail your body leaves. So here's what to do, and it costs you nothing. Dig out your most recent lab results, or ask for a copy at your next visit. Find the triglycerides and the HDL. You don't need to diagnose yourself. Just bring those 2 numbers to your doctor and ask one plain question. Do these suggest I'm becoming insulin resistant? That single question puts you years ahead of where most people start. Before we land on tonight's one change, a quick word on who this really matters for and where the doctor comes in. If you recognized 2 or 3 of these signs together, that's worth a real conversation, not a panic. Ask your doctor for a few specific numbers. Your fasting blood sugar, your A1C, which shows your average sugar over 3 months, and if they're open to it, a fasting insulin, and that triglyceride to HDL ratio. Never change or stop any medication on your own, and never treat a YouTube video, including this one, as a diagnosis. What these signs give you is a head start. Insulin resistance is at its most reversible in exactly this early, quiet stage, before it ever becomes diabetes. That's the good news hiding inside all 7 signs. And catching it early doesn't take a total life overhaul. It takes one honest change you'll actually keep. So here's mine for you, and you can start at dinner tonight. Eat your food in order. Vegetables and protein first, and save the bread, rice, potato, or pasta for the end of the meal. That's it. When you eat your fiber and protein before the starch, they slow everything down, so the sugar from that starch trickles into your blood instead of flooding it. That gentler rise means a smaller insulin surge, and a smaller surge means less of the crash, the cravings, and the storage we spent this whole video tracing. In one study of adults with type 2 diabetes, eating vegetables and protein before the carbohydrate cut the post-meal blood sugar spike by more than half, compared to eating the exact same food in the reverse order. Same meal, same plate, just a different order. So tonight, when you sit down to eat, make it a simple if-then plan. If there's a starch on my plate, then it goes last. Your salad or your green beans first. Your chicken or fish next. Your potato at the end. You've been cooking and eating for decades. This doesn't ask you to give up a single food you love. It just asks you to change the order. If you'd like this laid out step by step, I've put together a free action guide with a 1-week plan for eating in order and a simple grocery list to match. Look for it linked below in the description and pinned to the top of the comments. Now I'd love to hear from you. Of these 7 signs, which one did you recognize in yourself? Just the number is fine. Number 1, the after-meal crash, all the way to number 7, the one on paper. I read every comment, and your answer helps me make the next video more useful. And if you want to know exactly what to put on that plate first, the next video in this series breaks down the 5 best foods to steady your blood sugar after 60, and how to build them into meals you already enjoy. I'll see you there.